Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time to take a look at a ship that has found itself back in the limelight thanks to a revival of its fandom of origin. A ship that in itself is surrounded by a swirl of external factors. These represent a variety of things, including a shift of what people expect from creators, and exactly how seriously fans can take what creators say when it pertains to information added outside of the official text of canon. In short, it's going to be long and it's going to be interesting. It's Grindeldore, the pairing of Gellert Grindelwald and Albus Dumbledore. They hail from the Harry Potter series, or at this point, verse, as the universe has definitely grown beyond that central point and has expanded massively. This video is the winner of the monthly vote over on Patreon, where my viewers help me select a video that we are definitely going to do. Even if it's late, we always get to it. It's guaranteed, and it's usually pretty long. This one's long, Super Hulock was long, it's a thing. Long videos. So if you're interested in helping me determine content or helping support the show in that way, please head on over there. The link will be in the description down below. And of course, if you don't want to or can't, that is absolutely fine. I'm just thrilled that you're here to explore all of these varied ships and the stuff that surrounds them. So, get your wands out and get ready to explore the magical ship of Grindelwald and Dumbledore. The tale of this ship in many ways parallels the journey of the Harry Potter fandom when it comes to exploring issues of visibility and representation, and arises in many ways from what some view as either a genuine or questionable attempt from Rowling to address the issue. As the Harry Potter series went on and its original audience began to age along with Harry, as on top of society as always shifting and growing, what people wanted to see out of the Harry Potter series began to change, and people began to be more critical, albeit mostly lovingly at the time, critical of the series. Fans began to have many questions, ranging from plot holes to questions of perspective and representation. When it came to perspectives, many fans were intrigued by a wide array of side characters in Harry Potter and wanted to know more about their experiences, their thoughts, and their arcs. Dumbledore was one such character. Both loved and vilified, many wanted to know more about him. And as the novels had progressed, the reader had begun to be given glimpses into his past, a past that many found to be fascinating. As a result, many wanted to know more, particularly surrounding him and Gellert Grindelwald, a wizard said to have been the darkest and biggest threat besides Voldemort. The two had an alluring backstory, moving from the closest of friends to bitter enemies, although perhaps not as antagonistic as it appeared on the surface.
I can't move against Grindelwald. It has to be you.
However, despite this, Grindeldore was not a ship that arose from the text itself, at least not entirely, although there were people who were beginning to develop an interest in it. 2007 was after the release of The Deathly Hallows, the 7th book in the series, and the book wherein these two's backstory was fully fleshed out. A backstory that for some had all the makings of a ship, and yet for most that is not where it began. Instead, this ship was largely launched due to additional canon material provided by Rowling at a book reading and interview at Carnegie Hall during a question and answer session. A fan asked the following question: did Dumbledore, who believed in the prevailing power of love, ever fall in love himself? To which Rowling replied, "My truthful answer to you, I always thought of Dumbledore as gay. Dumbledore fell in love with Grindelwald, a bad wizard he defeated long ago, and that added to his horror when Grindelwald showed himself to be what he was. To an extent do we say it excused Dumbledore a little more because falling in love can blind us to an extent, but he met someone as brilliant as he was, and rather like Bellatrix, he was very drawn to this brilliant person and horribly, terribly let down by him. Yeah, that's how I always saw Dumbledore. In fact, recently I was in a script read-through for the 6th film, and they had Dumbledore saying a line to Harry early in the script saying, 'I knew a girl once whose hair.' I had to write a little note in the margin and slide it along to the scriptwriter. Dumbledore is gay." This knowledge was met with a mixed reaction at the time, with some cheering it as the positive representation they had been waiting for in the Harry Potter series and a great addition to Dumbledore's character, while others were opposed, some out of homophobia, and others out of a feeling that it was not supported by the text, and that Rowling should not be able to add additional details to her characters without having actual textual support. Pandering was not overly discussed, although those fears would slowly begin to materialize. As for Rowling, she stood by her admission, adding, "He is my character, he is what he is, and I have the right to say what I say about him." Following all of this, the pairing of Grindelwald and Dumbledore absolutely exploded in fandom, as people were excited to explore this newfound canon couple. Their history was scrutinized and elaborated upon, and people who had not given the pairing a second glance at first were suddenly much more on board. When it comes to meeting the players, there is still much to be explored and much left to fanon, as this Dumbledore is not the Dumbledore from the Harry Potter text, but instead a young man during his formative years, a man coming to find himself and his beliefs. Someone young, brilliant, and full of energy, determined to make a change. change, with no small hint of anger, which had things gone slightly differently might have very negatively been channeled. Capable of great love, even as a youth, Dumbledore proved that he would be willing to put duty ahead of his own personal pleasures. As for Grindelwald, a very similar type, also brilliant but much more arrogant, although the two are arrogant together. Full of a calculated darkness, Grindelwald's ambitions are less fueled by anger and more out of a sense of superiority. Dangerous, manipulative, clever, and cunning, Grindelwald took both the wizarding world and Dumbledore by storm, and not always in the most positive of ways. So for those who ship this pairing, what is drawing them to it outside of excitement of a canonical queer relationship? For one thing, the two have a compelling history. Fast friends from their first meeting, the two are brilliant, ambitious young men with their own ideas as to how to change the world. The two are driven and share an intense connection that continues even during their time apart as enemies. They understand how the other thinks and have shared unique, though not always positive, experiences together. They both know the darkness in each other and what the other is capable of, and for a brief moment embrace those truths together. People were also drawn to the idea of a darker Dumbledore, as many had begun to question his status as Harry's mentor, and this for some added some much needed nuance and acknowledgement of moral grayness to his character by allowing him to have been entranced by such a dark wizard. Many are particularly drawn to the lines, "Grindelwald, you cannot imagine how his ideas caught me, Harry. Inflamed me. Muggles forced into subservience. We wizards triumphant. Grindelwald and I, the glorious young leaders of the revolution. Oh, I had a few scruples. I assuaged my conscience with empty words. It would all be for the greater good, and any harm done would be repaid 100-fold in benefits for wizards. Did I know in my heart of hearts what Gellert Grindelwald was? I think I did, but I closed my eyes." The pairing had a lot to intrigue shippers, with its darkness, its ability to build upon unexplored canon, the potential to build up characters that many were excited to explore, as well as expand Rowling's world, and of course, the fluff and AUs as well. Although Rowling, as ever one to attempt to control her canon, went on to say in later 2007 interviews that the love was one-sided, and that Grindelwald had been manipulating and using Dumbledore's love for him for his own gain. Despite this, as one knows, fandom cannot be contained, and often picks and chooses what pieces of canon information it wants to accept. As a result, this statement was taken and explored by some or outright rejected by others, as intricate headcanons were established. And while it was never a large ship in the fandom sense, it was a well-received one for the most part, and one that most fans were happy existed, as for a time, all new canon info produced by Rowling was welcomed. At the very least, as time passed, it was accepted as canon, and some came to feel that there were perhaps hints in the text that they had overlooked. Again, while not the largest ship, it became an extremely important ship for certain fans. As for why people did not ship this pairing, well, there were some who could never accept the canonicity of Dumbledore as gay, and others who felt that as J.K. Rowling had herself stated it was a negative one-sided relationship, it was not worthy of further exploration. Or again, that it was a peripheral happening into the some much more interesting adventures of Harry or other characters. While others felt it would be a profoundly unhealthy pairing, doomed to tragedy and darkness, and it went into avenues they were not willing to explore, and that while Dumbledore may be positive representation, Grindelwald was not, although some argued for the inclusion of varied queer characters. For some, despite its canon endorsement, it was never as compelling as other fan-engaged ships, such as Drarry or Wolfstar, as many fans yearned for confirmation on Wolfstar in particular, as they felt that it had been in many ways coded into the text. All of these discussions continued on, though more and more quietly as the books were now published and the films were slowly concluded. For a while, this ship remained on an even keel, until it was once again brought into the light by the announcement of the Fantastic Beasts film series, a series that would amongst other things deal with the period of Grindelwald's activity leading to the epic and final confrontation between him and Dumbledore. As a result of this, a question was quick to be asked throughout fandom. Would the films dive into Grindelwald and Dumbledore's relationship, or finally portray an accurate version of Grindelwald? And would Dumbledore be shown as openly gay on screen, in a way he had not been in the books? Preceding the release of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Rowling had this to say: "I can't tell you everything I would like to say because this is obviously a 5-part story, so there's lots to unpack in that relationship. You will see Dumbledore as a younger man, and quite a troubled man. He wasn't always the sage. We'll see him at that formative period of his life. As far as his sexuality is concerned, watch this space." Fans took this to mean that they were finally going to get to see some queer representation on screen in the Harry Potter universe, and that the series was moving forward alongside its audience, and even fans who were not enthused or enamored with the pairing were expecting to see it depicted, as it had indeed been made canon and become accepted as fact over time. Once more, works began to flow, and while enthusiasm dimmed at the casting of Johnny Depp as Grindelwald following the controversy that came to surround the actor shortly before Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them's release, people were still waiting with bated breath to see this pairing in action, even if some wanted desperately to see Grindelwald recast. However, this pairing garnered itself massive mainstream attention and not of the positive variety following some interviews given surrounding these two's story in the, at the time of this recording, upcoming film Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, wherein it was announced that this couple's relationship would not be overt. Specifically, director David Yates stated that Dumbledore would not be explicitly gay, stating, "I think all the fans are aware of Dumbledore's sexuality. He had a very intense relationship with Grindelwald while they were young men. They fell in love with each other's ideas and ideology and each other." This caused swift backlash. Alongside some fans feeling that their fandom contributions were being used, fans quickly began to bombard J.K. Rowling, demanding an explanation, to which she replied, "Being sent abuse about an interview that didn't involve me, about a screenplay I wrote but which none of the angry people have read, which is part of a 5-movie series. That's only one installment in it. Obviously tons of fun. But you know what's even more fun?" Which she followed up with a gif of Lil Yachty clicking a mute button. As a result, there has been much retrospective analysis of the initial statement, which we must now examine, as J.K. Rowling's status within the Harry Potter fandom has changed quite radically since she made her initial statement. A change that itself mirrors a shift in what fans have come to expect from creators and fan interaction, rightly or wrongly. At the time of Rowling's initial statements, ease of access to creators and the ability to share additional canon material rapidly across the internet was still evolving, as was creators engaging directly in fandom, be it acknowledging ships, adding additional material, reacting to fan art, and more. As a result, there was much excitement and enthusiasm on all sides. Fans were emboldened to ask questions they had not often felt comfortable asking before outside of certain often con-based settings, and creators seemed to be receptive. While some were wary and guarded their work closely, others were enthused by this fan response and engaged oft-times as if they themselves were fans of their own work, which they most likely are. Rowling in particular became known for giving fans supplementary information, which for a time was very well received. However, even at the outset, there were some who were wary as they felt that there was a decent chance for pandering and for the fan base to be manipulated, as holes or faults with the text seemed to be being plugged by these newfound tidbits that were not always readily supported by the text itself. Others feared the seeming breakdown of walls between creator and fan, as they felt there is a much different implication and responsibility when a creator adds to their canon than fans, as a world's creator, what Rowling says ostensibly holds more weight. Over time, people came to notice that many of the headcanons or theories or changes Rowling affirmed/made regarded what could be constituted as flaws in her work. Although in fairness to her, she commented and continues to comment on absolutely everything. And others felt that her opinions were becoming strong and judgmental in a way that was beginning to impede on the fandom, placing certain characters and ships above others in a way that could lead to tension. The Crimes of Grindelwald incident cemented the thought that had been brewing in the minds of many, that perhaps Rowling had never actually envisioned Dumbledore as gay at all, or if she had not thought through what that would mean to her fandom, and that it would be something that they would expect to see represented moving forward. Now, there are those who feel that fans are being unnecessarily harsh, and that this is a 5-film series, and there are 3 more films with which to potentially explore this pairing, and people need to wait and see how the story develops. And perhaps it will not be as ominous or underrepresented as Yates seems to be implying, and many feel that it is simply not the place of fans to dictate how a work should develop. However, others feel that as Yates stated Dumbledore would not be explicitly gay, it is very unclear what kind of representation, if any, can be anticipated. Others feel that this was to be expected given the advertising push occurring in the Chinese and other less traditionally tolerant markets, while others counter that this should have been foreseen when Rowling announced this, while still more feel that Rowling is being given far too much credit with creative control. However, some are quick to cite the aforementioned story that Rowling herself told of writing Dumbledore as gay on the side of a page from the script of the 6th film. However this potential exclusion came about, it is clear that the furor surrounding it has been mishandled by Rowling herself, as just as many of Rowling's fans have had a falling out with her, so too has she with many of her fans. As Rowling began her fandom journey by making herself extremely accessible and willing to deal with fans directly, many fans still expect that kind of receptiveness. However, times have changed much since Rowling's initial announcement, particularly online. Social media, a burgeoning medium at the time, was nowhere near as dominant as it is at the time of this recording, nor was it used to share fandom information quite as frequently. As a result, Rowling continued her candid attitude and willingness to speak her mind into the dawning of social media era, and quite quickly found herself overwhelmed and inundated. This has not been Rowling's first scandal pertaining to her work, with fans quick to question and bombard the author, some with legitimate complaints, others with abuse. As a result, as a creator facing a constant barrage, it is easy to get the idea that one's fans are simply unpleasable, and to attempt to retreat to the den of the creator. Basically, that what one says in their universe goes, and that they themselves are entitled to space. And on that note, creators are correct, for everyone is entitled to respect. However, it is much more difficult to do this in Rowling's case as it pertains to this situation, not simply because of how accessible she used to be, but because of how staunchly she defended her position to disclose that Dumbledore was gay to her fans in the first place. Not that any of that justifies justify some of the vehement abuse that has been sent her way. It must also be added that some earlier interviews do give a hint that perhaps she was not exactly in step with what her audience was expecting given this statement. To me, it was not a big deal. This is a very old man who has a very terrible job to do, and his gayness, it's not really relevant. Very relevant to him as a character, as I always saw him as a very lonely character. And I think there is in fact a hint of it in the 7th, because the relationship he has with Grindelwald. He fell very hard for this boy, awfully trusting of this good-looking young man when he shows up. Don't you think it was perfect that Dumbledore, who was always the great champion of love Harry, love will save us, his one great experience of love was utterly tragic? It was with someone who was dangerous and demonic. It created absolute havoc in the world, and it created havoc for him. So that was my idea of Dumbledore's tragic backstory. I liked leaving it open so that perhaps a more worldly reader would see that they may have been in a relationship, and perhaps a 9-year-old would think he made a great friend and trusted him. I was okay with that. Looking back, it appears that this information regarding Dumbledore's character was more of a tool to help her flesh out the character in her own mind, which is a technique often employed by writers who maintain massive headcanons on their characters and worlds that may not all make it into the story. So the fact that Dumbledore's queerness is not exactly on display in the books is not all that surprising, especially as given the time period she was writing in, it was much more common for writers to harbor the notion that young audiences were not prepared for that kind of content, an opinion that if not held by the author themselves, may indeed be held by their publishing company, as queer relationships were/are viewed by some as more explicit and confusing to young readers/viewers. However, times are changing, and the current demographic and fan base is ready for some textual representation, a fact that Rowling may not have been aware of or anticipated when she made her initial statement. Even the screenwriters were not aware of this detail until she shared it. Some feel this reflects poorly on her writing, as if it was such a key part of the character, it should in some way have been evident, although it must be noted that perhaps this was not as central to the character as some fans wish to believe, and that an author cannot add to material that was omitted from the text and expect some kind of reaction. So 2 questions remain. Was J.K. Rowling pandering, and should she have shared her own headcanon? Whether she was pandering remains unclear, though it is clear that she grew more confident and enthusiastic about discussing this pair when she saw the impact it had on her fan base, as Rowling has always striven to keep Harry Potter relevant and in the media's eye, something she has most definitely succeeded in, though she cannot be given sole credit for this, as additional tie-ins and the fans themselves have also served to keep this fandom alive. Now, as to whether or not she should have revealed her headcanon rendering it actual canon, one's mileage may vary. For some, it is not that she revealed it that is troubling, but that she seems not to have kept up with her fandom and cultural discussions surrounding it, or current YA story trends, be they in novels or films. There is much more acceptance of openly queer stories in the Western mainstream these days, and some feel it will be a missed opportunity to push it forward in this new Potterverse series. Rowling's response, while perhaps understandable, has shown a clear and some would say willing disconnect with a large portion of her audience. The pairing of Grindeldore meant more to many people than other ships in this universe because of its canonicity, within a canon that did not have much representation, and Rowling herself opened the door by providing this information in the first place. Again, some feel that all of this scrutiny is unfair, as authors and creators are human as well, and like everybody, their opinions grow and change, and it is possible that many of Rowling's opinions have simply shifted over time, and that she is working through her changes of opinions in a public space just like her fans, and that just like anyone else, she should be entitled to do so. Perhaps this case can be looked upon as a warning, or a lesson for creators and fans alike, that both sides are still negotiating where the barriers should be, and that sometimes authors' headcanons are just that, and that fans should still take what creators have to say with a grain of salt. There are many willing to give these films a chance, or who are not bothered by the pairing being included or not included, as that is not their focus. However, for others, even if Dumbledore was never out in the novels, this announcement by Yates was a massive disappointment, as media can, does, and should change as the world around it does. Although some are hoping that the story may wrestle with Dumbledore's closeted nature given the time period when this film takes place. However, when it comes to changes, they are inevitable, as media and reality are often intrinsically linked, even when works are attempting to be escapist, as escapism can also be representative, though it does not have to be. Though of course, some feel this entire episode has been blown out of proportion, and that J.K. Rowling has been unfairly maligned when all she was trying to do was exactly what fans proclaim to want, to be engaged with and listened to. And she is still providing her additional Potterverse information to those who wish to hear it, including her yearly apology for the deaths in Book 7, this year at the time of this recording, Dobby. Indeed, some feel that incidents such as this one are part of what give fandom a bad name and will lead to creators closing themselves off and further the perception of fans as unpleasable and return them to the realm of not being a factor during the creation/production of such products. Feeling that Rowling should be allowed to distance herself from these questions and that fandom has changed greatly since she was initially so open with her fans. However, others counter that Rowling is simply not the best at handling her media presence, at least not her social media one, and that there was a much better way to handle this issue. Although in some circles, Rowling has a reputation as a social media sass queen, so mileage will vary on how people feel she handles herself on Twitter and other platforms. As for the pairing of Grindeldore, it is most likely that it will indeed have a resurgence and burst of new shippers when the film is released. And where the pairing goes from there, both in canon and fandom, only time will tell. As only once the film is released will people be able to truly see how the relationship was handled. So that was a whole lot of a lot. How do you guys feel about Rowling's initial statements surrounding Dumbledore's sexuality? Do you feel that it was genuine, or do you think it was pandering? How open do you feel that creators should be with their fans, and at what point do you think fans begin to expect too much from a creator? And how much responsibility do fans have on behalf of the fandom to ensure that it maintains a good reputation? Heavy questions, I know, but please share all of your thoughts and feelings down below. I'm so interested in this topic. It's really fascinating to me. Also, can we just take a brief moment to acknowledge that Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald is not the world's greatest title? Just throwing that out there. Also, with how block heavy she's been recently, I'm kind of afraid I'm gonna get blocked. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Follow me on social media so you know what I'm working on and what's coming up soon. Also, please hit that bell notification and subscribe if you're not already so that you never miss a vid. I'm looking forward to exploring more of fandom with you soon, and until then, let's get to the outro. Bye-bye. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of my patrons, names on the side, and the vote for this upcoming month is going on right now, so head on over if you haven't already voted. As always, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.